This is the Greg Bedard Patriots Podcast with Nick Cattles.
All right, here we go. The draft has started. We're getting ready for day 3 tomorrow. It's late on Friday night. Greg just got back from Gillette covering all the festivities there at the facility. But before we get started, got to remind you this episode is brought to you by Prize Picks, the largest daily fantasy sports platform in North America. Download the app today. Use code CLNS for a first deposit match up to $100. And do us a favor. If you like the program, you like the podcast, head on over to Prize Picks, sign up, use that code CLNS. All right, Greg, let's first start with obviously the biggest pick of this draft, and that is at number 3, Drake Maye. I'm going to ask you some specific questions about what happened and some of the offers that reportedly the Patriots turned down, but just your general thoughts on the player and the fact that the Patriots pulled the trigger on Maye at 3.
Yeah, I mean, look, it feels like we've been talking about him for a very long time. I think we dialed in on him quite some time ago, and there was, basically some sort of argument between, a debate on whether Jayden Daniels was going to go number 2 or what was going to happen. Also, J.J. McCarthy snuck into it. Found it funny that Michael Penix went before J.J. McCarthy when all things were said and done, and then Bo Nix right behind him. Just a crazy quarterback draft. But as far as the Patriots picking Drake Maye, look, just to tell people up front, I'm not a draft guy. I don't grade these things. I can tell you, what I like, what I don't like, maybe some of the better options that I thought might have been out there. But for the most part, I mean, I think this was a pick the Patriots had to make. And I think it was the correct pick. And, we'll see how that goes. Quarterbacks in the NFL, especially high in the first round, are fickle beasts. And you have to, really groom them the right way and put them in the right situation. And that ultimately decides whether they're a success or a failure. But as far as the prospect himself, I just thought, as we talked about previously, through the evaluation process, by the end, I had gone, obviously, Caleb Williams, number 1, and then I had gone Drake Maye, 2A, Jayden Daniels, 2B for the Patriots. Now, I think Jayden Daniels is phenomenal, and I would have been just fine if it had worked out that the Commanders took Drake Maye and Jayden Daniels was there. I just thought that Drake Maye, the way he's built physically in the end, to me, was better suited for New England, winter weather, 6'4", long arms, not the biggest hands in the world, but certainly big enough. Big arm to drive through the wind and the snow and the rain and whatever you might get at Gillette Stadium in the later stages of the season. But I just think overall, the entire package that Drake Maye presents, and it's extremely young. He's going to be 22, I think, in August. We heard Bill Belichick on Pat McAfee's show talking about Drake Maye. I think his criticisms of Drake Maye were totally spot on, especially the part about that he's inexperienced. He hasn't played a lot of football, and he hasn't. His senior year in high school was wiped out because of COVID. Others, like J.J. McCarthy, instead of staying put, he transferred down to IMG Academy in Florida where there were no COVID rules, and J.J. McCarthy played. Drake Maye did not, and so he didn't play his senior year in high school. He played very little his redshirt freshman year at UNC, and then he played 2 years. So really, he's played 2 out of the last 4 years. So he is very inexperienced, and that shows up on film. But I just think that the athletic ability, his makeup, his exuberance, his ability to lead. I think that we've talked a little bit about his family and his, being the youngest of 4 brothers, all great athletes. Dad was a great athlete. Mom was a great athlete. I think all of that stuff, really will end up being positives for Drake Maye. And, from what I heard from NFL scouts and executives that I texted today about the pick, they just think the kid is phenomenal. They think the makeup is phenomenal, and they think he's going to work his ass off. And everyone realizes he's not a finished product yet, and that's okay. But now it's up to the Patriots to do the right things.
Love the pick. You know, we've talked about this forever. It feels like, but it was the big swing. You and I, Greg, we both agree on this. When you're picking at 3, you take the big swing, which is why I did not want J.J. McCarthy with that pick. And I'm not saying that J.J. McCarthy is not going to be a good NFL quarterback. I just believe that you go for the ceiling, man. You shoot your shot when you're picking 3rd. And Elliott Wolf, he took that shot, and I love that. I love that they took the high ceiling, elite trait guy, and now they got to develop him. They got to work him, you know, into the system. They got to tweak some of the things that need to be tweaked, the footwork we've talked about, the mechanics, all that stuff. But I just love the big swing in that spot. I think he's a great fit for the system. He is the best quarterback in this draft, throwing to the middle of the football field, zipping it down the seam. Those are things that Alex Van Pelt's going to ask his quarterback to do. Bootleg action, back to the line of scrimmage. He has some experience with that. So I just think he's a really good fit. When you look at Jaden Daniels, he only had, I heard Burt Breer the other night say he had like 16 throws off the scramble. You know, Daniels has not been a guy that consistently throws on the move. He's not super comfortable with that. Michael Penix hardly ever does it, right? So, you know, when you start to look at the pieces to the game of Drake Maye, he is just he's the quintessential fit to this West Coast offense that Van Pelt's going to want to run. And the one thing that stood out to me, Greg, and I don't know how you feel about this, and I wanted to ask you because you've obviously been on the last couple of days, but there was a little bit of like the combine interview and everything, which was like pretty much nothing with the media. It is what it is. But what really stood out to me the last couple of days, because we've talked about this dude from pillar to post as a football player, was the personality. And he got swag. My man has big time swag. He's got confidence, and it exudes from him. And what I like about it, and I'm not telling you he's going to be great. He could flop on his face. None of us know. But what I like about it is he's confident, but he's not coming across as cocky. It's not like I know everything. He just has this air about him that he knows. He knows who he is. He knows the people around him. He's comfortable in his skin, and he's ready to embrace it. That really stood out to me, that the fun personality that he's got. I think fans are going to love this dude. They're going to love him.
Yeah, and I also think a part of his personality and makeup is his resilience, and that like he just and Elliott Wolf sort of talked about this, about how, you know, he was one of the only of the top quarterbacks who talked to the media after every single game. And Gerard Mayo talked about, like, you know, sort of his aha moment was, you know, Drake Maye basically, you know, taking a shot but bouncing back up. He just seems to have that sort of, you know, some of it's a little Gronkish. I would say it's a little bit smarter, Gronkish. Like he's kind of like a puppy. Like, and I know, you know, like Gronk was, like, you know, you kind of want to pet him on the head. Like he's in, and this is good and bad. He goes in like 8 different directions, and NFL scouts will tell you that shows up on film. That, you know, sometimes he's a little bit all over the place. But given his inexperience and his age, I'm okay with that. Obviously, the Patriots were, but it's something that he's got a lot of room to grow physically, maturity-wise, playing ability. But yeah, I mean, and even like, you know, I asked him a tough question in the press conference when we got him, when, you know, I brought up that just about every NFL analyst will say that the Patriots situation for a rookie quarterback, if it isn't the worst, it's one of the worst in the league. Yeah. And what he thought about that. And he didn't even bat an eye and just said, you know, we're going to prove him wrong. And, you know, I disagree with that. And, you know, and just, you know, it's just that it's sort of like, it's hard to explain. It's like this optimistic enthusiasm, and he just seems like a guy who's not going to be beaten down by his struggles. Now, that's what it looks like right now. And, right, you know, coming out of college and things like that, like, we don't know what he's going to be like in the pros. Like if the Patriots are like 0-8 and he's thrown like 12 interceptions, you know, who knows? He might get a little bit depressed and in a funk. And, those were some of the issues with Mac Jones. But I just feel like, and I think sort of the point you're going towards is that, Mac had a lot of good qualities, but I don't think, confidence, exuding that, the leadership type of thing, the alpha quality, that, no matter what happens, no matter what situation we're in as a football team or I'm in as a quarterback, like the next rep is a chance for us to be better and get it back. And I think that's been missing around here for at least a little while. And I think that Drake Maye, he comes across as the guy that is at some point in time is going to have the ability to lead this room, and the type of guy that others on the team are going to look for and follow when he's just like, all right, we're down 21-0. And I just threw 2 pick sixes. I mean, I don't give a crap. New game. Here we go. And I think guys are going to follow that.
Yeah, and what else stood out to me when Elliott Wolf and Gerard were talking to the media last night was the accountability. Elliott Wolf, very telling, said he's one of the only quarterbacks in this class that spoke to the media after losses. And we spent time on Caleb Williams and how he handled some of the post-game stuff. And look, Caleb's the talent is the talent, and he's also a younger guy, but I do think that obviously that meant a lot to the Patriots, that when the chips were down, UNC wasn't a very good football team. Drake was stuck in the middle of it. He didn't leave. He could have transferred. He could have went to Alabama. He could have went to other places. I heard Bill O'Brien today, and I've heard, other people talk about it. He could have went to Alabama. He could have got the bag through NIL to go to a couple of other teams. He decided to stick at UNC, and he knew the situation. He knew, I'm getting a different OC. I don't have as much talent around me. The offensive line's not great, but he stayed at North Carolina. And not only that, when they lost games and he didn't play well, he was right there in front of the media, and he took the questions. He answered the questions. And I think, especially to Mayo and Wolf, that means an awful lot. I also really liked, Greg, I said this on my podcast. I think it was last night. I don't know. I've done 100 podcasts the last 3 days. But, when Mayo was talking, everybody kills Mayo. And look, he has made mistakes. He has said too much at times. But I thought his answer, for the most part, when he was asked about, is Drake going to be the starting quarterback? I'm paraphrasing. And he pushed patience. And I think that's huge. Ownership has to be patient, and hopefully they are. Fans have to be patient. You and I have talked about it. Drake Maye is far from a polished quarterback. And I was glad to hear the head coach say, hey, look, there's all sorts of different timelines of quarterbacks. You never know with this position. We're happy with who we have in the room. I don't want to overlook the guys that we have on the roster right now. And that's the way they got to do it, right? I mean, they've got to handle this young man much differently than they handled Mac Jones. And they've got to give him time to work on the footwork, let Ben McAdoo, Van Pelt, McCartney, get in the lab with the young man, as they say. And then when he's ready, then you put him out there on the field.
Yeah, no question. And, I went back to, my evaluation of Maye, and, I said he is a very unrefined passer at this point. His throwing motion is a bit long and not natural. His footwork borders on awful at times, and he drifts in the pocket, which invites more pressure and sacks. He does not throw with good anticipation at this point. He's not great at reading the play and the defense from the pocket. And I said, to me, he very clearly needs to sit for at least a year. He's a very talented project. But then I said, this is where the evaluation comes in. All it takes is for one hard-o coach, could be Alex Van Pelt or Ben McAdoo, to say, I can fix that kid by the end of the first season. He'll start in year 2 at the latest. And they absolutely could be right. In that case, I might entertain Maye at 3 this year. The potential total package could be too tempting to pass up. And I think that's where the Patriots ended up. And look, I'm not a quarterback coach. I don't know. But, you hear these guys, whether it's, Brian Hoyer on NBC Sports Boston or, some of these other, QB sort of gurus, and they say like the lower body stuff is easy to fix. You can fix that with good coaching. Now, I will to reach his absolute ceiling, Nick, I think they do need to tighten up his motion. And that can happen. Aaron Rodgers, when the Packers drafted him, he came out of Cal. Jeff Tedford was his coach. Everything. He was a high carriage, like up by the ear, throw from here. That's not the Aaron Rodgers that we know. They turned him into an athletic passer. For Drake Maye to be an elite quarterback in this league, not only does his footwork need to be cleaned up, and also just learning the game and how to read the game and things like that, which can be learned. But his throwing motion, to me, it gets too long. He needs to be a little quicker around the ear. And if he can do all of those things over time, and just look at Josh Allen's one of the best examples. Now he had a lot more raw arm ability than Drake Maye has, but this can happen. Before Josh Allen, I thought I probably would have been like, no, I'm not taking Drake Maye at number 3 overall.
Yeah.
But we have learned from watching the transformation with a good quarterback coach in Brian Daboll what can happen. And I think they need to get to work. They need to be patient and, don't rush the kid until he's ready.
It's telling you brought up Aaron Rodgers, and I believe it was Drake Maye who said it when he met with AVP during the 30 visit. They looked at Aaron Rodgers' film, and I wonder if that was part of it. And the other thing that Elliot Wolf said that was telling, and this is something else you and I have talked about an awful lot, and you wrote that great piece about a week and a half ago when the source was talking about, consensus and making sure you have the offensive staff that believes in the kid and when Wolf spoke to the media last night, he said, I got assurances. I was assured by T.C. McCartney and Ben McAdoo and Alex Van Pelt that, the questions that I had about, some of the mechanic stuff that needs to be, tweaked. Can it be tweaked? Can it be fixed? And he said, yes, they told me, yes, those things can be fixed. And he put trust in the offensive staff and said, you guys are the quarterback gurus. If you feel like you can fix it, then we can rock with this kid. And I thought that was another crucial part of that press conference to let us know that, yeah, we did get the assurances. And yes, our staff is confident that they can fix these things.
Yeah. 100%. Where I came at the end of the day, and if I was the Patriots and, we know through reporting like from Albert Breer that both the Giants and the Vikings made offers on the number 3 pick. Yep. And my view on that was if the Patriots have any sort of, not dissension, but just a disagreement over Drake Maye on, whether these things can be fixed, what's the path forward for this guy, if there's any disagreement on that, then trade out of the pick. Then, just punt on it and go get more players and build up the situation and build for next year where maybe you trade up in the draft for somebody else. But quite obviously, Nick, Elliot Wolf is a guy who's not going to he's not going to be a lone ranger. And he knew he's not an idiot. He's been with the Packers. He's been in different situations and he knew it's quite obvious that the Patriots at the end of the day, they love the overall package of the kid. They love the makeup. And they all agreed and got together and said, this is the plan for this kid, and he can be successful here. And that's why they pulled the trigger and really didn't consider trading out of that spot and knew for a few weeks from what we heard last night that Drake Maye was their guy. And so to me, that's a great sign for the Patriots moving forward. Whether it's going to work or not, who the hell knows? But at least they're starting from a good point.
Yeah, none of us know. And, just to circle back on a couple of things you just mentioned, they apparently, according to Burt Breer, turned down from Minnesota 11, 23, and the 2025 first-round pick. That's what Burt said. And then Burt said that there was also a pick swap or pick swaps that were involved, that Minnesota actually would have had advantage with the pick swaps, and then Minnesota kind of stepped up a little bit when the Patriots were on the clock, but it still wasn't good enough. So that's what the offer was turned down from Minnesota. And then, so there are no players involved, no Christian Darasaws, no Justin Jeffersons. And then New York did, according to Burt, throw their 2025 first-round pick into the mix. So it would have been 6 and the 2025 first. Don't know if there was anything else. So that's just to put a bow on that. I did want to, I found it interesting, and I give you credit because you said this. When we had the podcast earlier this week, you said, I don't know if you said you would guarantee it, but Elliott Wolf's going to go out there and he's going to say, we knew what we wanted to do a couple of weeks ago. And that is precisely what he said. He said, Jayden Daniels, we knew he was going to Washington at least a couple of weeks ago. And, we had the focus on the 3 guys. And it seemed to me, I don't know if you agree with this, but he was asked about, some of the things that frustrated him or whatever about the last couple of weeks or caught him by surprise. And he mentioned like all the BS. And I kind of read that as the McCarthy stuff because he made it a point that our focus was on the top 3 guys. He was sending a message, at least that the way I took it. Caleb Williams, Jayden Daniels, Drake Maye. That's who we were taking at 3. We were not taking anybody else, and all this other BS, i.e. J.J. McCarthy at 3, was just that. Is that how you read that from what Elliott said?
100%. And also, Mayo said, not to talk about other players, but those top 3 guys, we were comfortable with all 3 of those guys, and it just happened to be Drake. And he has a lot of potential. We have a lot of coaches, and we have to develop him. I think, yeah, a couple of weeks ago, they probably after the 30 visits were over and they got, one sort of last chance with these guys. And, I think it was very clear that the Patriots, and you and I have been talking this way, for a long time. I mean, other people have been with agendas have been pushing, JJ McCarthy and things, and probably, some of it came from the Patriots just to, sort of, generate interest maybe in the pick and just see what happens. Cause just real quickly on those trades to me, they were the bare minimum that somebody needed to offer. But I never would have considered that. I needed Minnesota's package and also the Giants package with something else, either another first round pick in 2026 or a player to even consider moving. And they obviously didn't get that. But I think at the end of the day, and we know this from what they said, it was very clearly for them, these 3, and this is for some of the people out there who are just like, well, the Patriots just stood there and just took the 3rd guy after, other teams made picks. I mean, it's okay to evaluate it and say, we think these 3 quarterbacks are all franchise quarterbacks. The other guys we're not sure about. We might take them later if we trade down, if somebody makes us a ridiculous offer, but very clearly, these 3 guys at the top of the draft are franchise-type quarterbacks. Everybody else is a little bit different, and we're okay no matter which one comes to us. I don't think there's anything wrong with that.
Every draft is different. I said this on this podcast, and I said it on my own podcast going back a month and a half ago. They're like snowflakes. Every single one of them is different. And you don't know. You can have a draft where you have 3 franchise guys. You can have a draft where you have 1 franchise guy. You can have a draft where you have 0.0 franchise guys.
Yep.
We all love the math and the hit rates and the history, but it really comes down to each individual year and each individual evaluation. That's what it comes down to. And people get wrapped up in the numbers. It's not really about the number. It's about the grades. If Elliott Wolf and the scouting department have the top 3 quarterbacks in this class with a certain grade, and that grade hits the mark of, hey, they can be a future franchise quarterback, that's what the grade tells them. That's what they go by. And then they look at the other grades and they say, okay, J.J. McCarthy's below that. So the idea of you can't love all 3 guys, I'm sure that they had a pecking order. But I'm also sure that the grades were so close and the grades justified that whoever was at 3 was worth the pick because the grade was good enough. And they said, if it's a grade of 6.5 or whatever, whatever number you want to throw out there. All right, 6.5 as a franchise quarterback. Okay, great. So maybe Caleb Williams was a 6.5, and maybe Jaden Daniels was a 6.47, and maybe Drake Maye was a 6.45. And they're all looking at it and they're saying, well, hey, we think, with Maye's development, he could creep up and be that franchise guy for the next 15 years. That's how it works. So I just, some of the things, as we know, you and I, we talk about this. It's the silly season, and people get wrapped up in some of these, I hate using the word narratives because it's used so much, but that's really what happens. And it comes down to the grades. It comes down to the scouts, and they say, no, that guy has a good enough grade that we think he has the future. All right, let's jump to the second day. What happened earlier tonight? So we got a trade. Before I get to the picks, let's get to the trade and your thoughts on that. So the Patriots traded the 34th pick and their fifth-round pick, 137, to the Chargers for 37 and pick 110, which is a fourth-round pick. Did you like the trade, Greg?
So, I'm fine with the trade. I'm no expert, but according to the draft, any of the trade charts, it was pretty even swap. So, I'm fine with it as long as the Patriots didn't, pass up somebody that they really wanted or had a little bit higher rated. But if they're comfortable with it, the trade's even, so I'm good with it.
I actually loved it, and I'll tell you why. And it was even value, but I just love the idea in this draft, because you and I have talked about this with the COVID situation, the NIL situation. A lot of people will tell you that once you get to the fifth round of this draft, it's pretty much a dead zone. So to get that fourth round pick and to have 2 fourth-round picks in this draft, I think is extra value, and they really kind of control the top of the day now tomorrow again. And so, I mean, you could argue, and whether or not you liked how it unfolded, and we'll talk about that, but day one, they really controlled the draft because Caleb Williams was 1, Daniels was 2, everybody knew it. The draft began with the Patriots at 3. Really the same thing today. Bills moved down a couple times. They knew they were going to draft Keon Coleman. They were set on their wide receiver. The draft on day 2 really started with the Patriots at 34. And now it doesn't necessarily start with you tomorrow. However, now you have 103 and 110. You've got 2 picks very early in the fourth round, and now you have a ton of options. So I like it because you get rid of that fifth-round pick, and you add that pick in the fourth, and it gives you a little bit of extra leverage, and you can maneuver a certain way if you would like to do that. So I actually did love the trade.
Prize Picks is America's #1 fantasy sports app with more than 3 million members. It is the easiest and most exciting way to get in on the action while you watch your favorite sports and players. You just pick more or less in 2 or more player stats and watch the winnings roll in. Get in on the playoff action and win up to 100 times your money on Prize Picks as you and the world's best players take the game to a new level during basketball and hockey's postseason, which is coming up. I can't wait. I know Nick is going to be freaking geeked up for all that stuff. That's for sure. You can now win up to 100 times your money on Prize Picks with as little as 4 correct picks. You can turn $10 into 1,000 with basketball, hockey, baseball entries today on Prize Pick, America's #1 fantasy sports app. This week on Prize Picks, I'm selecting Jaylen Brown for more than 25 points, David Pastrnak for 2 goals or more, Tyler O'Neill, the big thumper, for 2+ home runs this week, and Kenley Jansen for 2 saves. Download the app today and use code CLNS for a first deposit match up to $100. That's CLNS for a first deposit match up to $100. Pick more, pick less. It's that easy at Prize Picks.
All right, so let's get to the picks. Ja'Lynn Polk, wide receiver, Washington, 37th overall. Elliot Wolf said that if they stayed at 34, Greg, they still would have drafted Ja'Lynn Polk. Just, again, 30,000 feet, your thoughts on the player before we have some more follow-up questions.
So I wasn't overly. I'll just admit I wasn't overly familiar with Polk. I stayed more to sort of like first round wide receivers, thinking that the Patriots might trade back into the first round. But I did watch some film on him, and I got to say he's pretty impressive. Not. I'm sure a lot of people he doesn't. I wouldn't say he has any great traits. There are certainly guys like Keon Coleman's more of a leaper, bigger guy. I mean, he's 6'1.5", 204, 4.45 speed. Not the fastest guy. I would say his best skill is his competitiveness. He's known for being sort of like a dog, somebody who's physical. He's not going to, wow you in any sort of facet physically, but the whole package is he's a damn good football player, and he's a damn good receiver that can play in a variety of roles. I thought it was interesting, and we've talked about it before, but Elliot Wolf was asked whether Polk can be an X, and Wolf said, well, in the system I come from, we don't really, look at that. We don't, sort of put guys in different categories. And I've told people that. Like, the Packers just go out and they get, at least when he was there, I'm not talking about, under Gooden, because it's a little bit different. They just go and get a bunch of good competitive receivers. And I think that, and ideally, when I think back to when I covered the Packers, I mean, you had, Donald Driver, you had Greg Jennings, you had James Jones, Jordy Nelson. Jordy Nelson and James Jones were both guys who were drafted somewhat in the same area, second to fourth round. I forget. Jordy Nelson was definitely second round. The Packers had traded out of the first round, and I want to say 2008. That was the first draft that I covered with the Packers. James Jones came a year or two later. Both of them were somewhat similar to Polk in that nothing that blew you away.
Yep.
And, and I made this comment on Twitter. Of course, people, overreact, where I said, this reminds me a lot of the Jordy Nelson pick, because I remember at the time, Packers fans were like, we traded down in the first round. We're taking Jordy Nelson. Like, he's not a burner. He doesn't do this. He doesn't do that. But guess what? Jordy Nelson was just a damn good football player and a damn good receiver and did everything well and had a long career. James Jones, very similar. Not the fastest guy in the world. I remember watching him, when they first picked him in practices, and I'm like, this guy's not going to blow by anybody. He's not going to make, defensive coordinators stay awake at night. But, you get enough of those guys, and they're a problem. With a good quarterback that can distribute the ball, they're a problem. And so I see Polk very similar. It doesn't surprise me now after watching some film that this is a guy that Wolf and Highsmith and those guys really liked, because he does remind me of sort of a prototypical Packer type receiver that's just a damn good football player.
A number of things here. He's got great hands. He's got some mitts on him. And you go back and you look at the Michigan State catch that he made. It is just obnoxiously great. And I retweeted it tonight. He is diving backwards, high points the football. Field Yates said that in the Michigan State game, Ja'Lynn Polk made some circa du Soleil kind of catches. And he's got just great body control. Not a big yak guy. I saw him play a number of times because I saw Washington play a number of times. I loved watching that offense. Not a yak guy by any means, but he's not afraid to go across the middle. He's not afraid to take a shot. Yeah. He's tough. He's a willing blocker. He's got great hands. Not always the greatest route runner, but he makes plays downfield. I mean, that was a huge part of that Washington offense, was make plays downfield. And Jalen McMillan got hurt this year a little bit. He got banged up, and you saw what Ja'Lynn Polk could do when McMillan wasn't in the game or when he was, not right. Polk just took over, and he over 1,000 yards and 9 touchdowns this year. So he's a tough guy. I think I think fans will like him. I think he's good. I loved the May pick. I wouldn't say I loved the Polk pick. I would say I really liked it. Another couple of notes quickly. His RAS, the relative athletic score, was an 8.85, which, is pretty impressive. Jacoby Myers, I think, was somewhere in the 6s. So his relative athletic score is better than you would think because, as you said, Greg, he's not a burner. But the 4.5 speed, James Jones, 4.59. Devontae Adams, 4.56. And I just wanted to bring this up to you and get your thoughts. The first 2 picks, at least, of this draft, really, to me, kind of in the Ron Wolf, Green Bay wheelhouse. And, Greg, you've been all over this. And I know certain friends of ours got worked up about you talking about the old Packers from time to time, our friends from 2 to 6. But you nailed it. Like Ron Wolf was all about elite traits, big swings at quarterback, go with the athletic guy with the arm. I'm going to take the shot at Brett Favre when everybody's thinking, what the hell is he doing? And then you look at receivers. We're not going to go in the first round for a receiver. We love the second round. It's the perfect spot. You don't need a speedster. You need that solid guy who can do certain things at a certain size. And I just look at Drake Maye and I look at Polk and I say, that's the start of a Green Bay draft. That's the philosophy. That's what we're seeing, play out. Am I right or am I wrong?
No, yeah, you're totally right. I mean, I just think these 2 picks were, totally out of the Ron Wolf Packer way. With the big swing at quarterback, and I as far as Polk, I would describe him as a safe pick, and like that's fine, and I just he keeps coming to my mind. It's Jordy Nelson, and it's just a guy that that has a extremely high floor. He might not have the highest ceiling in the world, but you put him, when I think about the Packers and their receivers, from overtime, from, even going back to Ron Wolf, I mean, Sterling Sharp wasn't a burner or anything like that. He just caught the ball and was freaking tough. He was probably better, run after the catch. But I just think of the Packers as like, you just saw 4, 5, 6 guys just roll out, and they almost all look similar. You just didn't know where anybody was going to line up, but you knew they were damn tough. They were going to catch the ball. They were going to convert first downs. And, I would describe the Polk pick as safe. And I don't, some people, they want the big swing. They want the big trait, but, we've seen that often doesn't work out, especially around here. And I heard, some people on Twitter, since Twitter's so awesome, they're comparing Ja'Lynn Polk to what's his name? Who'd they just the first round wide receiver that the Patriots had?
N'Keal Harry.
N'Keal Harry. They're calling him like N'Keal Polk or something like that. Like, come on, that's not even close.
No.
This is a damn good football player.
Yeah, I mean, if you wanted to compare anybody, it would have been Keon Coleman. He's more than a N'Keal Harry guy.
Yeah.
It's really fascinating because as you were talking, I was looking up the 40-yard dash times, and so Polk is 4.52, James Jones is 4.59. Devontae was 4.56, and you keep saying Jordy Nelson. So Polk again was 4.52, and Jordy was 4.51.
Wow,
it is.
Jordy was a little taller. He was like 6'3", so he was a little taller, but but nothing special. He didn't burn. He didn't exactly he didn't have a whole lot of swivel in his hips, but the dude was just a damn good football player.
The other thing too, before I hit you with a little bit of quick lightning round about Polk, and then we'll get to Caedan Wallace. As you were talking about Polk, the one thing that kind of stood out to me, I was thinking was, you took the big swing with Drake Maye, right? He's the high ceiling, could be low floor guy. Yeah. So it's not the worst thing in the world that you come back in the second round and you draft a receiver that I would say they probably think, yeah, he might not have a huge ceiling, as a number one guy, but we see the traits. And like if you're Elliott Wolf and even Alonzo Highsmith, that was in the, front office with Green Bay for a long time, I have to imagine they're doing what you're doing, Greg. Like they're sitting there going, oh, Jordy Nelson, James Jones. We've seen this guy before. We've seen this movie before. We feel good about his floor. So we took the big boom. We took the big swing at 3. Let's draft a guy that we've seen the movie before, and we feel pretty good that, even if he's not great, at his worst, he's still going to be pretty good for us. And so, again, I love the May pick. I really liked the Polk pick. So the one thing that I would say about Polk is we came into this draft, Greg, and you and I talked about this. You needed a true number one. He's not a true number one, at least right now. You look at him more as a 2. So first, he's not a number one, which is an issue. He's not really a natural X, and I know that Elliott said, we don't really go by X, and Z. And so I would also remind Elliott that just last week he talked about 3-by-1 and consistently beating, the backside coverage. So you can't really have it both ways. You might not want to label that guy, but you told us that you need that guy, and you still don't have that guy. How much of an issue is that right now as we sit here before day 3?
Not huge. I mean, I just, and it has nothing to do with Elliott Wolf or any of these guys. Like, it's a new day with the Patriots. I'm trying to, and this is the same way with that I would react to a Bill Belichick draft, where I'm like, all right, these are the good things, these are the bad things. We'll see. He gets to make his picks, and then we'll see. I just think that, when I look at this, I try to think a little bit more glass half full. I know some people will be shocked by this, but
wait, hold on. Hold on. Wet blanket Bedard?
Yeah.
All right.
I just think that, this team building thing is a process, but you look at the pieces they're putting in place, and, now they got the franchise quarterback, and we'll talk about the tackle, which I have a lot of questions about, coming up in a minute. But, if, and you have Pop Douglas already, you have, KJ Osborne. That's his name, right? Yeah.
Yes.
I'm drawing a blank. It's late. It's been a long couple days.
It's late. Yeah.
I think that, and then if you could make a trade for a wide receiver 1, and you already have Hunter Henry, and maybe they go tight end a little bit later. There's some interesting guys left on the board. You have Ramondre Stevenson. You get a picture like that in the next month or so. Like, now all of a sudden you're like, all right, this team is starting to go in a good direction, and I can see what they're trying to do. I just think, yeah, is it a complete picture right now? Is it a beautiful thing? And, you're comfortable with, Drake Maye if he has to play? No, but I mean, it's getting there, and we'll see what happens.
Hey, you've talked about Cortland Sutton, 4th round pick. They picked up the extra 4th. Do we wake up tomorrow morning and maybe one of those 4ths are being shipped to Denver? I'm fine with the wide receiver room 2 through 5 right now. You've upgraded. You've got Polk. You've got Osborne. You've got Kendrick coming back from the knee. Hopefully that works out. You've got Pop. Who knows what to expect from Juju? I'm good with the 2 through 5. They obviously need a true bona fide alpha, number 1. We all know that. We all see it. What I was thinking about this before I read the Elliott Wolf quote about, we don't really define receivers by letters and stuff. They do have a lot of interchangeable parts at wide receiver. I don't know if that's a good thing necessarily, but they do. I mean, you can move Kendrick Bourne around a lot. You can move KJ Osborne around a lot. Ja'Lynn Polk is a guy that played inside and outside at Washington. So they do have a lot of different pieces that they can move in different spots, but they still are missing that one dude. All right, let's get to Caedan Wallace. So
one more thing I just wanted to point out, Nick.
Sure.
On on that selection of Ja'Lynn Polk. One thing that I find interesting, and while I find it, so who are the two quarterbacks that Drake Maye is loosely compared to?
Oh, that's Josh Allen and Justin Herbert.
Yeah, I just find it funny that at 33, the Bills took Keon Coleman, who I had mocked, to the Patriots. The Patriots traded with the Chargers and took Ladd McConkey. And so, and now you have Josh Allen has Keon Coleman, Justin Herbert has Ladd McConkey, Drake Maye has Ja'Lynn Polk, all in sort of a bunch. So it should be a pretty fun comparison at the end of the day. I mean, look, the Patriots trading back, Keon Coleman, the Bills probably weren't coming off that, especially with what they did in the first round and, handing Xavier Worthy to the Chiefs, just like they handed them Patrick Mahomes. But, it's the Chargers traded with the Patriots and took Ladd McConkey. I mean, there's going to be a pretty big comparison between McConkey and Polk going forward. And it's just funny that the quarterbacks are somewhat similar as well.
Yeah, you wonder if it was about the body. McConkey's not a big guy. He's had an injury history. And maybe the Patriots just like the idea of the more kind of sturdy, bigger framed. Polk is, 6'1", 203. So maybe it just came down to that. I also found it interesting. Polk brought up Keenan Allen when he was talking about players that he kind of fits a little bit with the mold. So that kind of goes in with the Justin Herbert stuff too. So, hey, look, Ja'Lynn, if you can end up being the Keenan Allen for Drake Maye that Keenan was for Justin Herbert, I think we'd be in really good shape. All right, so then you've got Caedan Wallace. And I'm going to admit to the world, got a little frustrated for about a good 3 to 5 minutes on my podcast tonight when the Chiefs moved up and drafted our guy Kingsley. I was annoyed.
Yep.
And I started to kind of get a little upset. Now, not angry, but I was a little frustrated, Greg. And I was wondering, are the Patriots going to pick a damn tackle? Or are they going to pick a tackle? And I got to the point where I was like, you know what? Just pick a tackle. If you pick one, I'll be happy. If you draft one at 68, okay, we took a step in the right direction. And they did draft a tackle at 68. I don't know how many people had Caedan Wallace on the bingo card. I certainly did not. I had no idea who the hell he was. I love college football. I watch it. I'm not breaking down the all 22 for Penn State and their right tackle. My apologies. But I guess I'll ask you first, your kind of immediate reaction when Caedan Wallace was the pick at 68.
Underwhelmed. And I went and I watched a couple of games worth of film with him, and I'm still a bit underwhelmed. And let's also put this into context that, the Patriots were picking at 68, pretty high in the third round. In the second round, towards the bottom, Patrick Paul from Houston goes 55 to Miami.
Yep.
Blake Fisher, who I had mocked to the Patriots in the third round, goes 59th to the Houston Texans out of Notre Dame. Roger Rosengarten, Washington, offensive tackle, goes 62nd to the Ravens. Suamatia goes 63rd in a trade up to the Chiefs. And so, I'm watching those guys, and these are all guys that I had on my sort of short list on this guy has a chance possibly to play left tackle at some point. That's basically where also the Yale kid was on who ended up going later in the third round.
Yep.
That was about the extent of my list as far as guys. And now, look, I didn't study everybody, and I'll admit I didn't study Caedan Wallace, but I watched a couple games worth of film on him. I'll just give you my impressions. First of all, the good parts. He's big in the caboose, which I love. I love a nice big-butted offensive lineman.
Yeah, get a big badunkadunk, and Greg likes it.
He definitely does. I will say, and I watched him against Ohio State, and I watched him against Michigan. Two pretty talented teams. He doesn't get beat a lot. He really doesn't. He's pretty fundamentally sound. His kick slide pretty good. Decent. He doesn't have exceptional foot movement, quickness. I wouldn't say he's not a dominating run blocker either. If he was, he would have been drafted higher. I'll just say that I was extremely surprised when Elliott Wolf said that they think that he has the athletic ability to play left tackle. To me, and again, I don't know what the hell I'm talking about. These guys have been studying these guys a lot longer. They have 2 offensive line coaches on their staff who have a lot of experience. I would say it's a stretch to say that he can play. All right, maybe he can play left tackle instead of Okorafor or whoever else they have at left tackle at some point.
Yeah,
that doesn't mean he's good. That doesn't mean it solves anything for you. But as far as being a good left tackle in this league, I would say that's a stretch. But I do think he's a good, solid player. I think this is another solid, safe pick. I don't think he has a lot of bust potential. I think whether it's at right tackle or at guard, he reminds me a lot of Michael Wenu. And, if everybody remembers, when Michael Wenu was good, but Michael Wenu doesn't blow you away in any way. I would say that Wenu's a lot more dominating of a run blocker, when he gets ahead of steam. But this is look, the Patriots passed on a lot of guys that had more upside, that also had sort of high floors as well. And they decided this was their guy. According to Elliott Wolf, like all along, this is who they wanted. To me, there's a lot more questions about this pick and whether, really, like what the hell are they going to do with them? I mean, between Chuck Okorafor, Calvin Anderson, Tyrone Wheatley, Vidarian Lowe, Andrew Stuber, like they have a bunch of guys that are like, all right, maybe, okay. So I don't know. It's definitely the most questionable pick that they've made so far. Of course, it's in the 3rd round. You would expect that, but that they passed on a lot of those guys that had a lot more upside and a lot more potential. To me, it surprised me. I would have targeted one of those other guys and traded up and gotten him.
I don't know much about him, and I go off of people that watch the film and break down offensive line play. I will say that Lance Zierlein mentioned in his write-up on the player that he thought he was better. He thought, Wallace was better fundamentally and technique-wise than Olu Fashanu.
I would agree with that. Yep.
Louis Riddick also was over the freaking moon with this pick.
Really?
Oh, yeah, you got to go back. And I don't know if you DVR'd it or whatever, but Riddick literally said, I can't say a bad thing about this player. And he waxed poetic about how Caedan Wallace, I think he said, I love this pick at least 2 or 3 times. So Riddick was big on the Caedan Wallace pick. And he also was another guy, along with Zierlein, he brought up Olu Fashanu, and he said, look, I'm paraphrasing, of course. It's not like I transcribed Louis Riddick, but he said something along the lines of, when I watched the tape, I watched the film, this guy is at least as good, if not better, than Olu Fashanu. And, Wolf's point tonight was, and who knows if it's true, but if Olu Fashanu isn't on this football team at Penn State, then Wallace is playing on the left side. That's what Wolf said. So did he get that from the coaches? Maybe the coaches told him that. Like, hey, the only reason why he's on the right side is because Fashanu's here, and Fashanu, is kind of the higher ceiling guy. I also think, I believe Elliott Wolf, and maybe I'm just being gullible, I believe when he says that Caedan Wallace was their guy. Because, again, they have pick 103 and 110 in the 4th round. If they wanted to move up, they had more than enough ammo. If they were saying, oh, my God, we got to move up and get this guy or that guy, they had the means to do it. So the fact that they stayed at 68 and said, no, we're going to pick him, I tend to believe Wolf. If they didn't have those picks, then I would say, oh, he's full of crap and he's trying to sell that. But they had more than enough to scoot up 5 or 6 picks to draft any of the guys, Greg, that you mentioned. And really, look, they got to nail the eval. It's as simple as that.
Yep.
With Okorafor, with Wallace, am I confident? I am not. But I am also not an offensive line guru. I do not like the idea walking into the season with Okorafor on the left and Onwenu first-time, full-time right tackle. Don't love that at all. But if they nailed the eval, I'll be the first guy with my hand up going, all right. I doubted them. They proved me wrong. Okorafor was good enough on the left side. Wallace was good enough to play. So, these guys watch more film than all of us do. And as you mentioned, Kugler and Peters are 2 guys that have really good reputations in the game. They're watching the film. So they got to nail the eval and they got to nail the development. And I think you've brought up a very good point the last couple times about the offensive line coaching. I mean, they just haven't had offensive line coaching for like 3 years. So if Peters and Kugler are as good as advertised, then maybe they take a dude in Wallace and they develop him. One more thing about Wallace before we wrap this up in a few minutes. I don't know who it was on the NFL Network, but I went back and I watched both reactions, ESPN and the NFL Network. I don't think it was Jeremiah. It might have been Joel Klatt, but somebody brought up the idea of, Wallace, I don't know if it was work ethic or something, but they kind of hinted towards the Penn State coaching staff got into him a little bit. And in that last offseason, before this last college season for Penn State, he took it more serious. And their point was, and I think Riddick said this too, Riddick said, like, if you watch the year, if you watch the final few games, you could see that kind of the light went off. And he was good through the regular season, and he was good through the majority. But as the tail end kicked in, he got even better. And so the thought was maybe he just didn't put his all into it. And then going into the final year, he finally was told by the coaching staff, or maybe he figured it out himself that, okay, I got to get moving with this thing. And he showed, I think the phrase was marked improvement in his final season. So again, who knows? But there are some things that you can look at and say, all right, maybe they can make the best of this thing. All right, I'm not going to ask you for a grade before we move on to the couple of guys that you want to mention before we say goodbye to everybody. But just kind of your overall feel of day 1 and 2. Did you like what they did? Did you love what they did? Are you whatever to what they did?
I definitely have a lot of questions. I can't get and everybody knows I love offensive line play. The Wallace pick confuses me. I'm not going to be, down on it. I completely agree with, the comments that you relayed about Fashanu. At the end of the day, I was not a Fashanu guy. I would not have taken him. I probably wouldn't have taken him at all. I think he went 11. He went to the Jets. He's a guy that you're betting on, he's got all the tools. He's got all the upside. Those guys have not worked out in recent years at offensive tackle. So I completely agree that Wallace he's a much more fundamentally sound player than Fashanu. And the whole left tackle, right tackle thing, it's somewhat similar to, Notre Dame, where, the Fisher kid, he was originally going to be the left tackle, but he got hurt early on in his freshman year. And then Joe Alt went in for him and they never moved Joe Alt.
Then it was over.
Right. And so, that happens. And, you never know in college. Sometimes, colleges promise hey, if you come here, you're going to be our left tackle. And, but I think, Wallace it's interesting that you bring up. And I think NFL Network I was watching at the time, and I think it was Klatt and Daniel Jeremiah. They both sort of said something along the lines of, they brought up how Penn State underachieved on offense, and that they wanted more out of Wallace. at some point, and maybe he reacted well. But I will say it shows up on film that you're like, he's not exactly like an ass kicker at tackle. But like I said, he's a very fundamentally sound player. He's a good player. He doesn't get beat a lot. When he does have issues, it's against speed, spin moves, things like that. He has some issue. His punch isn't the greatest in the world, but I do think he has a low bust potential. I think he'll play in the league for a long time. Just to me, him playing left tackle, that's a stretch. Would I say he's better than Isaiah Wynn was possibly at any time when he was with the Patriots? Yeah, I could see that, but the foot speed isn't great.
I'm happy. Generally speaking, I'm not a happy human sometimes, but with this draft so far through the first 2 nights, I'm happy. I loved the Drake Maye pick. I really like Polk. I don't know anything about Wallace. Again, I go off of what I read and hear and see tonight. I like the idea that they got a tackle, and hopefully the evaluation is correct. Peters, Kugler can get him going a little bit. And, you walked in, Greg, to the first couple of days thinking quarterback, wide receiver, tackle. You walk out of the first couple of days with quarterback, wide receiver, tackle. So in that instance, I feel pretty good about what they've done so far. Before we get to just a couple of names.
I forgot to answer that question, because I got caught up with Wallace, which I tend to do with offensive linemen. But, yeah, I think my overall impression of what they've done so far, Nick, is that, and I've talked to a few people related to the Packers, and, during the whole course of this. And, one thing that stuck out to me is they're like, you just really need 2 really good draft classes in your back end business. And, they might have done some of that last year with the Patriots draft class. To me, this feels like outside of May, because May they had to do with the quarterback. But as far as Polk and Wallace, and we'll see what they do on day 3. But to me, once you got back by May, I think they're just trying to hit solid doubles with some upside.
Yep.
And just to sort of restock the cupboard at certain places. And they're like, yeah, this guy might have more upside, but if we whiff, we're right back in the same position. We need to get a tackle that we know can play in the NFL. Are there other guys like Patrick Paul that has more upside? Hell yeah. But he could bust in 1 season. This guy is probably going to play for a long time in the league. Exactly where? We're not really sure, but we're getting Polk's going to play for a long time in the league. Wallace is going to play for a long time in the league. And this is what we need to do, at least for this year, to sort of get things back on track.
It's a great point. And I think you're just so accurate in the assessment of what they're trying to accomplish here. We have to remember, this was an utter shit show offensively. It was a disaster zone, folks. And we said going in, how difficult of a needle is it to thread to nail wide receiver, quarterback, offensive tackle in one draft? It's very difficult. And so you took the big swing at quarterback, and now you're just trying to kind of steady the ship, so to speak. Because if you blow these picks, like Greg just said, you're going back to stage 1. And it's we can't get out of the muck. So at a certain point, yeah, you could have taken a swing on A.D. Mitchell, who I love as a talent. I do. Greg's not as big of a fan. But Greg's guy, Bob McGinn, about a week or 2 ago, came out with certain things. And I know Chris Ballard went cursing and, cut a WWE promo at his press conference tonight about A.D. Mitchell and his character and all of that.
Oh, did he?
Oh, yeah.
Check that out.
Called it bleeping BS and was ranting and raving about how people were killing his character and, the anonymous source thing.
Yeah.
And what I would say to Chris Ballard is then why did a first-round talent go all the way down to 52?
Right, exactly.
What are we doing here? There's obviously reasons. So They could have taken an A.D. Mitchell and said, hey, there are a lot of questions about this guy, but he's got the talent to be a wide receiver 1 if he hits. But if you swing and miss on that, now you took 2 boom or bust guys in round 1 and round 2, and if they both bust, you are so screwed. So I think you make a very good point on that idea. And Wallace, look, he's a guy, I think he started like 40 games at Penn State, got a lot of experience.
Might have been 60. He's 24 years old.
Oh, so maybe it was 60. But he's a guy who's, you know, at least like Greg said, he's solid. Is he a left tackle? TBD. But he's solid. And they feel like he's a dude we can plug and play in at least a couple of spots here and not sink the ship. All right, before we go, just want to remind you, this episode is brought to you by Prize Picks, and we do have a couple of names that Greg wants to talk about and I want to talk about, but Prize Picks, largest daily fantasy sports platform in North America. Download the app today. Use code CLNS for a first deposit match up to $100. Also, check out Greg, Giardi, the rest of the party over there. I like that. Greg and Giardi and the rest of the party. $50 for the year at Boston Sports Journal. I can rhyme all the time. All right, so I know by the time you guys listen to this, and gals, it's likely that day 3 is over. Or maybe it's in the middle of day 3.
Hopefully not. Hopefully I think Amit's on it tonight, so hopefully it'll be out for
Really? Oh, God bless Amit. Does he live on the West Coast?
Nope. I saw him at Gillette last night.
Look at this guy.
Mm-hmm.
Amit's the man. Hold on. I got to take a sip of my beer, Greg.
Okay.
All right. Mission accomplished. All right. So we're going to still give you some names, some guys that we're looking at, so we can go back on the record and say, oh, they did land some of those dudes. Because there's actually some talent left, Greg. There really is. And I'll just say this. I get a kick out of this. It happens every year, and you see it and you hear it. And I'm sure people, even the very astute BSJ subscribers, I'm sure a few of them will be like, how did they not get this guy? They drafted this guy at this spot, and they could have. I had somebody on my podcast tonight be like, they could have got this offensive. They could have got Caedan Wallace at like 110. I'm like, well, how do you know that? Like, we thought Tez Walker was going in the top 55 or 60. We thought A.D. Mitchell was a first-round pick. We thought Suamataia was going to be in the top 40, and he fell all the way down into the – like, we don't know. The mock drafts mean nothing. They mean nothing. NFL front offices have their own grading system and their own boards. So we don't know. So there's actually a number of guys that we've talked about that you thought would go in the first 3 rounds, but are still on the board. So I'll lead off quickly. I'll just give you some names. Tez Walker, just brought him up. Ex-receiver, obviously, teammate of Drake Maye. If you want to make your rookie quarterback happy, then you might think about drafting his college teammate who happens to play a position that you need. So Tez Walker's a name. Javon Baker is a guy from UCF, Greg, that they looked at. Another ex-receiver, another bigger guy. He's interesting to me. Cade Stover, tight end from Ohio State, is an interesting player. And I got to throw a Notre Dame guy in there. So I'm going to go with Cam Hart, bigger cornerback. If you go defense, I think he has the potential to be a cornerback 2 on the outside opposite of Christian Gonzalez. So those are 4 guys that pique my interest. What about you?
So I was definitely going to mention Tez Walker just because, do they pair Drake Maye and Tez Walker up again? That would certainly be interesting. I'm sure they can get plenty of intel from Drake Maye on him. I wouldn't mind. There's a couple of tight ends that are intriguing to me that are out there. And, if they pick this guy, they've gone full Packers. And, people can go crap in a hat for me bringing it up. But if they go Jatavion Sanders out of Texas, to me, he's Jermichael Finley.
Yes.
Who was a rising star with the Packers out of Texas until a neck injury ended his career. And Jared Wiley, the TCU tight end. Those 2 guys. Yeah, those 2 guys are on the board and intriguing and represent, upside. Definitely, I would like to see them just positional wise. I would like to see them at a corner, possibly a quarterback at some point. They'll, let Alonzo Highsmith do his thing at running back. That guy finds running backs undrafted, 7th round, whatever. He's a wizard at it. I'll leave that up to him. Defensive tackle, I wouldn't mind, but another wide receiver and a tight end, that would be, and a quarterback to displace Bailey Zappi. Those would be at the top of my list.
All right. It's about 1:15 on Friday night. Here we are doing a podcast because we love it. He's Greg. I'm Nick. We'll be back early next week, and we will have the full picture of what this team looks like. Do they make a trade for a veteran wide receiver? What do they do with the rest of this draft? We'll have those answers for you. But enjoy your weekend. Be safe, be healthy, be well. Until next time, we'll see you.